C.J. Gardner-Johnson's cut from the Texans came out of nowhere, but instead of staying silent, he fired back with a response that lit up social media.
I ain't got no respect here, as in the league don't respect me.
His reaction wasn't just emotional, it carried a message, and when that message finally reached the higher-ups, what followed left everyone in complete shock. Gardner-Johnson's disturbing reaction. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's release from the Houston Texans was one of the most unexpected moves of the season. Just days ago, he was viewed as a key piece for the defense, and now he's out, sparking heated debates across the NFL. Fans are asking, what went wrong and why now? When the news came out, Gardner-Johnson didn't hold back. Instead of letting the headlines control his story, he jumped online and fired back with raw, unfiltered emotion. His message wasn't just about football, it was about respect, loyalty, and the reality of the business. To fully understand why these words carry a lot of meaning, we need to critically evaluate the incident that led to this point, the shocking release that nobody saw coming. The NFL world was absolutely stunned on September 23, 2025, when news broke that would send shockwaves throughout the Houston Texans organization and leave fans questioning everything they thought they knew about their team's direction. In a move that can only be described as seismic, the Houston Texans unexpectedly released veteran safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson after just 3 games into the 2025 NFL season, effectively ending what was supposed to be a cornerstone addition to their secondary defense. This wasn't just any ordinary roster move. This was the kind of decision that reverberates through locker rooms, front offices, and fan bases alike. Gardner-Johnson, often abbreviated as CGGJ by those in the know, had been positioned as one of the most significant acquisitions of the Texans offseason. The 28-year-old former Pro Bowler, known for his versatility, trash-talking style, and hybrid nickel or safety role, was supposed to be the missing piece that would elevate Houston's defense to elite status. But sometimes in the NFL, the best laid plans crumble faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, and that's exactly what happened here. The move came amid the team's winless 0-3 start, with Gardner-Johnson serving as a starter but failing to mesh with the defensive scheme under head coach DeMeco Ryans. The writing was on the wall, even if nobody wanted to read it.
As if it wasn't bad enough, the Texans just released C.J. Gardner-Johnson, your starting safety. Now, there's more to the story. There's some, layers to this onion that we're going to peel back on today's show, but
the timing of this release couldn't have been more brutal for Texans fans who were already enduring what can only be described as football purgatory. This decision, first reported by NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, highlights a combination of on-field struggles, off-field friction, and strategic roster adjustments, effectively cutting ties with a player who had been acquired via trade earlier in the year to bolster what was supposed to be a championship-caliber defense. To truly get a glimpse of the magnitude of this move, we need to dive deep into Gardner-Johnson's journey to Houston and the expectations that surrounded his arrival. Gardner-Johnson was traded to the Texans from the Lions in March 2025 as part of a package involving a 6th-round pick, a move that was designed to address secondary depth after significant roster changes and injury concerns. The acquisition was met with fanfare and optimism, as Gardner-Johnson brought with him a championship pedigree that included a Super Bowl victory with the Philadelphia Eagles. The expectations were sky high from the moment he set foot in Houston. Preseason hype positioned him as a vocal leader and scheme fit for Ryan's aggressive blitz-heavy defense, drawing comparisons to his disruptive 2022 Eagles tenure, where he notched 6 interceptions. Fans and analysts alike saw him as the perfect complement to an already talented secondary that included rising stars and established veterans. But the NFL is a cruel mistress, and sometimes the most promising stories take the darkest turns. Gardner-Johnson suffered a knee injury during August training camp, creating the first crack in what would eventually become a complete breakdown of the relationship between player and organization. The injury was concerning enough, but what made it even more troubling was the timing. Gardner-Johnson was supposed to be getting acclimated to a new system, building chemistry with new teammates, and establishing himself as a leader in the locker room. Instead, he was watching from the sidelines, trying to absorb a complex defensive scheme while dealing with the frustration of being unable to contribute on the field. He returned just in time for Week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts, but the damage had already been done. The lack of preseason reps, the missed time building relationships, and the pressure to immediately contribute to a team with championship aspirations created a perfect storm of circumstances that would ultimately lead to his downfall in Houston. The timeline of his brief but tumultuous tenure with the Texans reads like a cautionary tale of how quickly things can spiral out of control in professional sports. In March 2025, he was traded from the Lions with high expectations. By August, he was dealing with a knee injury that kept him out of crucial preseason preparation time. And by September, he had 3 games that would define his legacy in Houston, and not in the way anyone had hoped. His tenure in Houston lasted only 187 snaps across 3 games, where he recorded 12 tackles, 8 solo, but was flagged for coverage breakdowns that allowed explosive plays. The most glaring example came in Week 2 against the Chicago Bears, where a coverage bust led to a 75-yard touchdown that left fans and coaches alike questioning what had gone wrong. The financial implications of this release were staggering and spoke to just how desperate the situation had become. The release saves the Texans approximately $4.5 million in cap space from his 1-year prove-it deal worth up to $6 million, but it also represents a massive sunk cost for an organization that had invested significant resources in acquiring and developing Gardner Johnson as a centerpiece of their defensive rebuild. What makes this story even more compelling is the context surrounding Gardner Johnson's career trajectory. This wasn't some unproven player who failed to live up to modest expectations. Gardner Johnson entered the 2025 season with high expectations after successful stints with the New Orleans Saints, Philadelphia Eagles, where he won a Super Bowl in 2023, and briefly the Detroit Lions in 2024. He was a proven commodity, a player who had succeeded at the highest level of professional football. This release allowed the Texans to pivot to depth options, with MJ Stewart positioned as the next man up in the safety rotation. But here's the thing. Replacing Gardner Johnson's experience, versatility, and championship pedigree wasn't going to be as simple as plugging in another body. With his absence, the Texans had lost more than just a safety. They had lost a player who was supposed to be a cultural cornerstone of their defensive transformation. As news of the release spread throughout the NFL community, the reactions ranged from shock to schadenfreude, with many observers noting that this was yet another example of how quickly fortunes can change in professional sports. The player who had been celebrated as a key acquisition just months earlier was now looking for his 5th team in 7 NFL seasons, a journeyman safety whose talent was undeniable, but whose ability to fit into organizational cultures remained a persistent question mark. So what made Gardner Johnson's potential so questionable? Let's explore further. The friction that tore everything apart. The surface-level narrative of C.J. Gardner-Johnson's release from the Houston Texans was simple: poor performance, scheme-fit issues, and a struggling 3 team making desperate moves. While this is the popular story, it only tells a fraction of the real story. It's safe to say that the truth behind Gardner-Johnson's shocking departure runs much deeper, involving a toxic combination of personality conflicts, ego clashes, and fundamental disagreements about how football should be played at the highest level. What emerged from multiple league sources painted a picture of a relationship that was doomed almost from the start. According to multiple league sources, this relationship ran its course after weeks of escalating tensions. This wasn't a sudden decision made in the heat of the moment after a disappointing loss. This was the inevitable conclusion of a deteriorating situation that had been festering beneath the surface since Gardner Johnson's arrival in Houston. The first major red flag should have been obvious to anyone paying close attention to Gardner Johnson's career trajectory. This marks the 5th team Gardner Johnson has played for in his 7-year career, following stints with the Saints from 2019 to 2021, the Eagles in 2022 and 2024, the Lions in 2023, and now his brief tenure with the Texans. When a talented player can't seem to find a long-term home, it's rarely just bad luck or unfortunate circumstances. It's usually a pattern that speaks to deeper issues. The problems began with scheme fit and on-field struggles that went far beyond typical growing pains. Gardner Johnson repeatedly failed to grasp Ryan's complex cover 3 and zone-heavy concepts, leading to miscommunications and big plays surrendered by the defense. In the first 3 games alone, the Texans allowed 3 plays of 50-plus yards, with film reviews showing Gardner Johnson out of position on several crucial occasions. But the on-field issues were just the tip of the iceberg. What really sealed Gardner Johnson's fate in Houston was his approach to leadership and his inability to adapt to a team culture that valued accountability and selflessness above individual recognition. His insistence on blitzing more clashed with Ryan's emphasis on coverage discipline, resulting in reduced snaps late in games and a growing disconnect between player and coaching staff. The locker room dynamics became increasingly toxic as Gardner Johnson's frustration mounted. Behind the scenes, Gardner Johnson alienated teammates with public and private criticism, including blaming others for defensive lapses during film sessions. This wasn't constructive criticism aimed at helping the team improve. This was finger-pointing and scapegoating that eroded trust and unity within a young locker room.
And I mean, maybe we should have seen this coming. Maybe the writing was on the wall with every team that he's been with. He hasn't been with them for longer than 2 seasons.
The situation escalated when Gardner Johnson began voicing dissatisfaction with his limited role and demanding more aggressive packages. This wasn't a veteran offering suggestions or providing input based on his experience. This was a player who fundamentally disagreed with how he was being utilized and wasn't shy about making his displeasure known to anyone who would listen. The final straw came when he ultimately requested a trade, a move that completely eroded whatever trust remained between him and the organization. In a league where loyalty and commitment are paramount, requesting a trade after just 3 games sent a clear message that Gardner Johnson's priorities weren't aligned with the team's long-term goals. These issues echoed past concerns from his Eagles exit in 2023, where he was viewed as a risk due to attitude and contract demands. At this point, the pattern was becoming clear. Gardner Johnson was a talented player who could contribute to winning teams, but his personality and approach to the game made him a difficult fit in certain organizational cultures. Following this perception, the Texans front office, led by GM Nick Caserio, made a calculated decision that prioritized long-term team chemistry over short-term talent retention. With the team desperate to salvage their season, the front office prioritized unity over a disruptive veteran on a short-term deal. The message was clear. No individual player, regardless of talent level, was bigger than the team. The financial implications of this decision highlighted just how toxic the situation had become. Just 3 weeks before his release, the Texans converted $6.58 million of CJ Gardner Johnson's salary into a signing bonus, demonstrating that the organization had legitimate plans for incorporating him into their long-term vision. The fact that they were willing to eat that financial loss speaks volumes about how untenable the relationship had become.
Just 3 weeks ago, the Texans converted $6.58 million of CJ Gardner Johnson's salary into a signing bonus. So basically, they gave him the money up front. They clearly had legitimate plans for their secondary.
The tactical issues were compounded by Gardner Johnson's apparent inability to understand his role within the team's broader defensive philosophy. Film breakdown revealed coverage busts that directly led to explosive plays, including a 46-yard gain against the Jaguars, where Gardner Johnson was completely out of position. These weren't minor mistakes or communication errors. They were fundamental breakdowns that suggested a player who either couldn't or wouldn't adapt to his assigned responsibilities. The comparison to other problematic veterans eventually became unavoidable. Analysts drew parallels between Gardner Johnson's situation and that of Deontay Johnson, another talented player whose attitude issues ultimately outweighed his on-field contributions. According to experts, the NFL appears to be littered with players who possess undeniable talent but can't find long-term success because they can't adapt to different organizational cultures and expectations. What made Gardner Johnson's case particularly frustrating for the Texans was the contrast between his public persona and his private behavior. In interviews and press conferences, he often spoke about being a winner and bringing championship experience to Houston. But behind the scenes, his actions suggested a player more concerned with individual recognition than collective success.
I think this was a great move for me. I think it allowed me not to get too comfortable. People understand, like, I was comfortable where I was at. It was easy. When I say easy, it was I had resources I could easily access, people I could just go talk to. I think moving here, being an older guy, I actually have to grow up.
The irony of Gardner Johnson's situation wasn't lost on observers who had followed his career closely. He had repeatedly emphasized his winning pedigree and championship experience, positioning himself as a veteran leader who could help guide younger players through adversity. But when faced with his first real test of leadership, which was helping a struggling team find its identity and overcome early season struggles, he chose self-preservation over sacrifice.
I'm a winner. I think y'all okay, let's understand this. Everybody understand I'm a winner. Regardless of what you can pull up stat-wise or rating-wise, I'm always on the winning side of football.
The Texans' decision to release Gardner Johnson now, rather than trying to work through the issues or waiting until the end of the season, sent a clear message about their organizational values and priorities. The move was framed as avoiding a midseason distraction and opening opportunities for younger players like Jalen Petra or undrafted rookies. It was a statement that character and chemistry mattered more than talent alone. The timing of Gardner Johnson's departure, coming just hours after a crushing 24-17 loss to the Vikings that dropped the Texans to 0-3, amplified the drama and speculation surrounding his release. Since the announcement, the move has dominated NFL discourse for days, with shock value amplified by its timing. It wasn't just a roster move, it was a statement about the organization's commitment to culture and character over talent. So what happens now? And what does the future look like for Gardner Johnson? Let's keep digging. The aftermath, reactions, reflections, and what's next. The dust had barely settled on C.J. Gardner-Johnson's shocking release from the Houston Texans when the NFL world erupted in a cascade of reactions, analysis, and speculation that would dominate sports media for days to come. The ripple effects of this decision extended far beyond the confines of NRG Stadium, reaching into locker rooms across the league, sparking debates among analysts, and leaving fans to grapple with the harsh realities of modern professional football. The immediate aftermath of the release saw a fascinating contradiction between Gardner-Johnson's typical social media presence and his surprisingly muted response to finding himself unemployed once again. For a player known for his outspoken personality and prolific use of social media platforms, Gardner-Johnson remained relatively subdued publicly compared to his typically outspoken social media presence. This silence spoke volumes about either the shock of the situation or perhaps a newfound understanding of how his words and actions had contributed to his predicament. His most direct response came via Instagram story on September 23rd, shortly after the news broke, where he shared a Bible verse referencing strength and resilience. This post, which has since expired from stories but was widely screenshotted and reported, signaled a focus on faith and perseverance rather than the bitterness or anger that many might have expected from such a volatile personality. The measured nature of Gardner-Johnson's response stood in stark contrast to his previous reactions to career setbacks. After being traded from the Eagles in March 2025, he had told the Pivot podcast that Philly was scared of a competitor, framing the move as an organizational shortcoming rather than acknowledging any personal responsibility. The fact that he chose scripture over confrontation this time suggested either growth, exhaustion, or perhaps the sobering realization that his pattern of team hopping was becoming a liability.
I said the way I play football. Like, y'all, think about it. Y'all admire guys that was just like me 10 years ago. Ed Reed, Sean Taylor, Ray Lewis, Dominican Sue. The list goes on of players who was feisty, passionate, and didn't take no shit.
The broader NFL community's reaction was swift and multifaceted, revealing deep divisions about Gardner-Johnson's value as both a player and a teammate. The release sent ripples across the league, with quick takes focusing on Gardner-Johnson's talent versus his volatility. Analysts also found themselves wrestling with a fundamental question that has plagued the NFL for decades, and that is, at what point does talent cease to justify character concerns? Philadelphia Eagles fans provided some of the most passionate reactions, with social media flooded with bring back CGJ calls, citing his role in their 2024 Super Bowl win. The nostalgia was palpable, with fans remembering the highs of his championship contributions while seemingly forgetting the complications that led to his departure from Philadelphia in the first place. Eventually, the reunion speculation proved to be more wishful thinking than a realistic possibility. On one side, the league-wide analysis revealed a fascinating split between those who saw Gardner-Johnson as a victim of circumstance and those who viewed him as the architect of his own professional destruction. Analysts like ESPN's Tim McManus called it a surprise but not shocking, given his history, while Fox Sports noted the irony of Houston's win-now roster dumping a proven playmaker amid their struggles.
But at the same point, maybe this is what the Texans needed. Maybe they needed the toxicity out of the locker room. Maybe C.J. Gardner-Johnson wasn't the veteran leader that they hoped he would be in these tough times.
Currently, the speculation about Gardner-Johnson's next landing spot has become a cottage industry among NFL insiders and fans alike. Free agency speculation pointed to contender secondaries needing blitzers like the Chiefs, Ravens, or even a Lions return, where he tore his pec in 2023. Each potential destination came with its own set of questions about whether Gardner-Johnson could adapt to yet another system and whether organizations would be willing to take on the risk associated with his track record. The Kansas City Chiefs in particular, despite their reputation for rehabilitation projects, saw quick fan rejection of any potential interest. Chiefs fans dismissed the possibility with posts like this, demonstrating how Gardner-Johnson's reputation had spread throughout the league's fan bases. This skepticism wasn't limited to Kansas City, and it reflected a broader wariness about taking on a player whose pattern of short tenures and locker room issues had become impossible to ignore. Several other social media reactions also painted a complex picture of public opinion, ranging from sympathy to an analytical breakdown of what went wrong. Semantic searches revealed frustration with his poor productivity in late-game situations, as well as locker room controversy, with users questioning his fit anywhere in the near future. This digital discourse revealed how quickly narratives can shift in the modern NFL, where a player's reputation can be built or destroyed within a single news cycle. Now, while the news continues to spread wildly, the immediate impact on the Texans' roster construction has forced the organization to scramble for solutions at the safety position. Right now, the team hopes this purge stabilizes a defense that's allowed 90 points through 3 games, even though they're 0. 3 hole deepens the urgency for a rebound. The financial implications are also significant as well, despite the cap hit, which is projected at around $7, $8 million for 2025. The Texans' move to let go of Gardner Johnson was framed as a next man up reset, with second-year Kalen Bullock and veteran MJ Stewart expected to step in. With this decision, it is evident that the team is willing to absorb such a significant financial loss, demonstrating just how untenable the situation had become. Now let's look critically at something a lot of people are ignoring, and that is Gardner Johnson's career prospects, which are set to suffer serious implications. To start with, Gardner Johnson's market value remains high. PFF grades him as a top 20 safety when healthy. However, the pattern of short tenures with multiple organizations raises serious questions about his long-term viability as a roster-building block. And now, this psychological and emotional toll of yet another fresh start will likely not be overlooked in the analysis of Gardner Johnson's situation. For a player who had experienced the highest highs of professional football, including a Super Bowl championship, it's safe to say that the repeated cycle of joining new teams, struggling to fit in, and ultimately being released represents a profound challenge to his identity and self-perception as a winner.
I ain't got no respect here, as in the league don't respect me. They don't respect me, bro. I'm the menace. That's what y'all call me, right?
This recent release has highlighted broader questions about veteran leadership and the responsibility that comes with experience and success. Gardner Johnson had positioned himself as a championship-tested leader who could help guide younger players through adversity, but his behavior in Houston suggested a disconnect between his self-perception and his actual impact on team culture. Looking forward, Gardner Johnson's path to redemption will likely require more than just finding another team willing to take a chance on his talent. Think about it. This is his 4th team in 5 years, and it raises questions about his $810M market value as a short-term fixer. At this point, the pattern has become undeniable, and future organizations will need to weigh his undeniable playmaking ability against the very real risk of locker room disruption. No doubt, the story of C.J. Gardner Johnson's brief and tumultuous tenure with the Houston Texans serves as a cautionary tale about the delicate balance between talent and chemistry in professional sports. It also demonstrates how quickly relationships can deteriorate when expectations aren't met, when communication breaks down, and when personal agendas supersede team goals. As one social media user aptly summarized the situation, communication issues, good way to make it a short stay. The simplicity of that observation belied the complexity of what had transpired in Houston, but it also captured the essence of how professional relationships can unravel when fundamental values aren't aligned. As it stands, the aftermath of Gardner Johnson's release will continue to unfold in the weeks and months to come as both player and organization attempt to move forward from what can only be described as a failed experiment. For the Texans, the challenge will be proving that addition by subtraction can work and that prioritizing culture over talent was the right decision. While for Gardner Johnson, the challenge will be finding an organization willing to take a chance on a talented but troubled player. What do you think? Will he get another chance to play in the big leagues? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And for more videos like this, click on this next card on your screen.